So if I just go in and do this, which is say click live now on Twitter, you see, because this is great. This is particularly good for the people who join on podcast, because they they just get silence, particularly when the chat freezes for me. There we go. Let's just do that and do this and click this button here and then put that here. I think everyone can hear me, which is good. Yeah, there we go. Hooray! Let's do this. It's me. Oh gosh. Hello everyone. Hello. Welcome to tonight's Rail Natter. Yeah, sorry about the brief interlude in last week's episode where the chat froze and I just didn't press F. I'm always wary to press F5 on the live stream feed in case it cuts the feed. But no, it should be fine. Lots of hellos. Hello to everyone. Hello to everyone who joining through via Patreon. All my Patreon people. Hello to all of you, particularly the new people. There are a few new people who are joining. Actually, that's a very good point. It'll be fine. They'll be fine. Let's not worry about it. It's been a bit, as ever, Wednesdays. I really need to get into the habit of prepping these on a Tuesday evening, not on a Wednesday evening after work finishes. How are you all? Hello. Big shout out to Jim Chisholm, actually, who sent through a fantastic book for me. Feel free to just send me books. This makes me very happy. By this particular gentleman here. Who's this? Who's Eric Laithwaite? Hopefully all of you know who Eric Laithwaite is. But this looks like a particularly interesting one, and it's relevant to today's chat, in fact, because transport without wheels is completely stupid. This is science fantasy, so I would chuck it out. But actually, there's some fantastic maths and science in here. And maglev, it is a thing. And it will continue to be a thing in China and Japan because they've basically built as much high-speed rail network as they can. When you finish doing that, you do need something else, and you might as well, step up to the next thing, which is very, very expensive, but you don't care. If you've got a saturated high-speed rail network, you can go to the next technology. Anyway, that's a segue. So let's put that over here. Maglev is for another rail natter, isn't it? I still haven't had a haircut. Let's not worry too much about that. And in fact, let's not dither around with me yammering on. Hello to everyone. Oh, there's already some chat about Leeds has come up already. Lovely. People are getting involved. Marvelous. Yeah, Eric Laithwaite and his Christmas lectures. They're they're famous and they're brilliant. He was a really inspirational chap. Yeah, segways are not a form of rail, Chrissy. That is correct. Anyway, without further ado, let's crack on, shall we? And we'll get on with talking about why light rail is not a metro. Isn't it stunning? The beautiful Intercity 225, that DVT just kind of cruising out of shot. Oh, I'm going to come back in big screen form so you can be reminded what the theme is, despite the fact that it was just on the title card. Yeah, this is going to be another, well, these rail natters are often a bit, they're a bit ranty from me, but hopefully, oh wait a minute, let me just do this, because I was framing this did a nice little interview with Dave Frankel. David, if you're here, hello, for a video that he'll be putting out. Check David out on YouTube. There's loads of good stuff in there that he'll be putting out at some point this weekend, Friday or over the weekend. Talking about High Speed 2, actually, funnily enough. Anyway, right, before we talk about light rail not being a metro and other gripes, and line up your questions, I got a question through on for whoever sent me a nice long question through on Patreon. I answered it on Patreon just in case you haven't checked. Let's go on to the news. What is the news? Oh, golly. Okay, the first piece of the news is... if you think about the news, I do not want to... I don't want to emulate Well There's Your Problem podcast too much, but it's so tempted to get a car run at the bottom. But I'm not. I'm going to resist. I'm going to resist that much as it would be good fun. Um, maybe I should do it. They've got theirs as being like increasingly low resolution. So I mean, Alice, Justin, Liam, if you're watching, which you won't be because you've got bigger things to do, like recording more 4-hour podcasts. Apologies. It might happen. I might do a thing for the news. Anyway, this bit of news is about pacers. These awful pieces of junk. There will be a pacer episode just to cheer up Pacer Commander. They're awful. Should never have existed. They're just an accident. They're just an accident. Of people forgetting that we needed to have a new generation of DMUs and we didn't develop any. Anyway, that's another story. But they're getting dispensation. They're not getting scrapped entirely yet because of well, the excuse is COVID, but actually it's just general railway industry incompetence, which is mostly government's fault because they should have been procuring a new fleet about 10 years ago rather than doing it all last minute. So so unfortunately people are going to have to live with, or indeed not live with, this just means that some people can't travel by train. It's as simple as that. These trains exist, it means that people can't travel on them. So we've got the excuse of COVID for the rest of this year, but if they're not gone very, very early next year, then it's totally unacceptable. It's already totally unacceptable. Anyway, more of the news. These two former competitors are combining into what are they combining into? All-Star DA. I don't know what they're combining into. The merger's been confirmed. It's happening, which means that poor old Siemens are going to have a really big competitor on their hands. I mean, they seem to be taking it in fine stead. I was pleased to be on a kind of an internal call with Siemens and what they were sort of, it's a press thing, and what the outlook was, and this was asked about, and they didn't seem too worried because frankly we need to not be. There's plenty to go around for all of the suppliers and providers. They just need to be, we need to be pushing and lobbying government to invest in public transport, and then it wouldn't matter. Anyway, we've had Bombatom. There are a few. John Bull was coming up with a few interesting, different sort of mashups of what the name might be. Anyway, all good fun. Right. Anyway, on to the subject of tonight's chat. Any chat on any nattering on the news? We've got enemies to lovers. That's right. I couldn't agree more, Sarah. Here we are. Chris Bird reckons. Oh, here we're getting on into all the chat. Engineering folk. No. Pacers did not save a thing. Pacers did not save branch lines at all. There is no. Sarah Noble has picked up who I reference when I say the news. Thanks, Sarah. There is no news about the Dacia Sandero, none at all. I had this. Have I talked about this epiphany that I say the news? The reason I say the news like that is because I'm mimicking, without realising it, Clarkson. Isn't that horrifying? Anyway, we'll move on from that swiftly. Thanks, Sarah. Ted Fuller, #kill the Pacers. Yeah, they need scrapping. They should have been scrapped about 20 years ago, but never mind. Best RDA is, yeah, well, indeed. It is mostly because of late deliveries of 769s. That is true. Both are bidding for HS2. Yeah, it's an interesting bit of a mess. No Chris Packham rant this week. No, because No, I'm not mentioning the fact that Packham lost his court case because I'm magnanimous in victory. It's not a victory though. I don't feel good about it. The case should never have been brought, and now it has been brought. It's being used to, support the government's road building program. So it's not that it was just a harmless thing. Some people are saying, it's good. It's good that it can prove HS2's efficacy in environmental credentials. No, this was not a legal case about HS2's environmental credentials. It was just about the fairly mundane understanding of the point of the Oak River Review. Which was baseless, hilariously baseless anyway. But as a result of that, the precedents that have been set by this case are now being used to support RIS2, which is the government's 4,000-mile road building programme, all of which are pointless and not a mile of new road should be built, or certainly not a new road upgrade. And it doesn't mean that highway engineers go out of business. I was moaning about this the other day, including the company I work for, a huge number of people work as highways engineers. I'm not suggesting those people go out of a job. There is a lot of highways work to be done in repurposing the existing roads we have so that we can create more tram lines for starters, but also cycleways. That requires highways engineers. If you're turning an urban dual carriageway into a single carriageway road and maybe a dedicated bus route on the other side, or perhaps a proper cycling infrastructure on the other side. These need highways engineers. There is plenty of work out there for highways engineers. You're not being put out of a job. It's just that government needs to stop spending money on utterly pointless, massive infrastructure, kind of road infrastructure projects that we've known for over 100 years don't work. They don't alleviate congestion. They make congestion worse. There's a thing called induced demand. It works on railways too, except that generally on railways it's a good thing. Build it and they will come, which is bad for roads, good for railways. Anyway, right, lots of ranting. So, urban rail transit. Right, so this chat is not going to be about rural railways. It's not going to be about rural transport, because rural transport is that bit more simple, because it's not as high intensity, so you generally don't need as many categories of it. And where you do have these categories, fine, it's just not that interesting. But really, we're talking about urban rail. And where you do have these things, different highly categorized systems of rail transport spreading out into rural areas, it's probably because they're next to a city. So, urban rail transport. What is urban? What are we covering when we're talking about urban rail transport? What are we covering? Oh, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do this. There we are. Sorry, forgive me, everyone. Well, the issue we have is that and this is the whole point of this rant, is that we've got these two systems here that are kind of the key examples. The West Midlands Metro and Manchester Metrolink. Now, these systems have the word metro in their name, and they are not metro systems at all, in any way. They are in a city, but that doesn't make them metro systems. And that kind of leads on to the point, is that why doesn't it make them metro systems? Why aren't they metro systems? Why is it bad to call them metro systems? Even, okay, if you accept the fact that giving something a name of a better infrastructure system or a better transport system is politically clearly quite useful, which is a bad thing to be discouraged. But then how do you know what is and is not a metro? Dave is here. David Frankel is here. Yes, lots of people love that. Hello, David, by the way. Nice to see you. Nice chat the other day. That was good. So these two systems, they're brilliant. They're great systems, but these should be ancillary systems. Both of these cities, these are the kind of the second and third largest cities in the UK. And I'm not going to say which is which, because by different measures you get different results. Birmingham's the second city, Manchester's the third, but they fight. Burnham might punch me in the face if I said that, but Burnham would definitely beat Street in a fight, wouldn't he? Anyway, but that's not for a rail natter. That's for the after the rail natter after party, where we're all getting high on nuts and drinking kombucha. Anyway, these two. Good grief, I've gone off on one already. These two systems should not be the main urban transit systems in these two massive cities. Don't get me wrong, Birmingham and Manchester are, by any measure, massive cities. They're not like, Manchester and Birmingham are not like small cities, you compare them to others like that. These cities are absolutely huge. They are massive. On a European level, they are massive cities. And they are cities that merit a proper metro rail system, a proper mass transit, rapid transit system. So, but also you get other issues, which is where there's not just the metro confusion, but also we get situations like the DLR, that's the Docklands Light Railway in London, is not a light railway. It's called the Docklands Light Railway. It ain't a light railway. It's a rapid transit system. So why are we so confused about why are we getting confused over our naming? Well, okay, the DLR is named such because it kind of was a bit of a light railway when it opened, and it was or certainly when it was specified and named. But actually, by the time it came to fruition, it had changed into being it had dedicated right of way. It had no at-grade crossings, which makes it rapid, and it had high frequencies and decent capacity, which makes it a rapid transit system. So we need to work out, we need to work out some sort of naming system and then stick to it. And accepting, as Chris Bird has pointed out several times, metro really is a bit of a marketing term. Well, yes and no. It is clearly used as a marketing term, but you wouldn't call, we shouldn't call for example, we shouldn't be calling metro system. I'm trying to think of another example like high-speed rail. There aren't really any examples I can think of where you'd open a railway that is not a high-speed railway and call it a high-speed railway. There are probably more examples in Europe than there are in the UK. We just don't build any new railways, so we don't have any examples to pick out. Yes, I am actually complaining that the DLR is too good to be a light rail, David Shepherd. It isn't a light rail system. So Mike Wooldridge is suggesting that metro systems, tram systems, light rail all come under the umbrella of rapid transit. Nope, that's not correct. Rapid transit is has a very specific term as defined by the UITP. So no, rapid transit is very much a specific term, and it's defined by capacity, but also by the fact that it is not at grade with any road crossings. It's entirely protected. It doesn't mix with other traffic forms and on track as well. There's a specific rapid transit is a very specific meaning, which is why we shouldn't call bus rapid transit. We should be eliminating that description. Bus rapid transit is a contradiction in terms. It isn't rapid transit, and we shouldn't be called. We should be shouting about the fact that bus rapid transit ain't rapid transit. We should be ignoring it. Ned Carlson, Brightline, NEC, whatever VIA is trying to build. Yeah, these are good examples. The US is better at building heavy rail and calling it a thing that it isn't. The Welsh Government including buses within the definition of the North Wales Metro. Yeah, I mean, by all means have an integrated transport system, but don't call it a metro. It's not a metro. BRT equals jumbo shrimp. Thanks, Brian. Rapid transit is grade separated. Yeah, Jermaine, you're absolutely right. Yes. Anyway, right. So, where was I? What was I? I'm missing it. Sarah, you're going out to eat. You're going to eat out later. Any idea? I feel like I've missed part of the conversation. Could tram trains form a metro? No, they couldn't. Because if it's tram train by definition, it's probably got grade. It'll have at-grade stuff on the tram bit, which makes it not a metro system. What would I call the South Wales Metro? A mess. It's not that I'm disagree with what's happening as part of the South Wales Metro project. I just think it's certainly an entry into having a better integrated transit system. It just shouldn't be called the South Wales Metro. It should be called the South Wales. I don't know. South Wales Urban Transit Network. It's not as snappy. You see why people use Metro? Anyway, let's talk about railways. So you're all about to get the benefit of a brief bit of lecturing. I try not to make RailNatter a lecture, but I've nicked my slides that I deliver as part of my lectures at the University of Birmingham, just to explain why railways are a good idea, why railways are why they're good. Why is a bus system that ostensibly looks like it might provide the same capacity as a tram system? Why do I generally think that in that case you should always go with a tram system, not a bus system? And it all kind of, so essentially the question I'm asking here, there's a nice picture of railways, the question I'm asking here is basically what gives rail its edge? It's kind of worth going through outlining the context, if you like, within which track infrastructure was developed, and kind of why the railway is still here today, and why rail is better than tyre. Why steel wheel on steel rail is better than pneumatic tyre on tarmac. Throughout pre-industrial history, there kind of wasn't much choice for moving things around, particularly if they were heavy. So paved roads existed well before Roman times, but a horse and cart still couldn't really move large loads around at any great speed. For most people, moving your goods about meant piling it on top of an ass and hoping for the best, to be honest. And then in the middle of the 1500s, some absolute bright spark realised that if you kind of split a log in half and rolled another log on top of it, you could reduce the friction enough to move much heavier loads around. This kind of rudimentary form of track infrastructure didn't really see much use out of industrial applications, though, for kind of a really long time. There's a lot of chat going on about tram train. Good grief. Much. There we go. So Mike Wooldridge has already gone into Wikipedia to check my definition of rapid transit. Anyway, right. South Wales Integrated Future Transbit, SWIFT. Sarah Noble has literally just named the South Wales Metro better than the South Wales Metro name. Sarah, you're in. You've got a job. Anyway, what was I on about? Oh yeah, talking about water. So water is arguably the earliest means of mass transit. Up rivers, across seas. People have been using inland waterways, particularly rivers, to move things around for a really long time. But only when the Industrial Revolution arrived did canals, certainly British-style canals, kind of start carrying frequent cargo shipments inland. And in the UK, a huge network, as we all know, everyone here I'm sure knows, in the UK certainly a huge network of canals was constructed in a very short space of time. Comparatively large loads they could be transported by barge and still would only require 1 or 2 horses to get moving, thanks to the incredibly low friction offered by water. It's pretty slow, but it did the job. So the thing that combines all of these is really that until the Industrial Revolution, until the steam age, we didn't have any way of getting more than 1 or 2 horses involved, and horsepower involved. But the infrastructure was starting to reduce friction. So if we flick onwards, in just at the turn of the 1700s and 1800s, this kind of Cornish bright spark, Richard Trevithick, started attaching high pressure, essentially giant kettles, big boilers, to wheeled carriages. He started connecting steam engines to wheeled carriages, and in 1804 he ran a locomotive along the existing tramways. There'd already been kind of a plateway between Penydarren and Abercynon in South Wales, top of the South Wales Metro, in South Wales, which is where the first sort of locomotive running on a plateway happened. In South Wales. So, hooray, South Wales! And here it is, looking kind of a bit daft, but that's fine. Kind of looks pretty punk, actually. Anyway, right. By 1825, and then really by 1830, you had the Stockton-Darlington and the Manchester-Liverpool railways, which were the kind of the first modern railway systems, particularly Liverpool-Manchester. Actually, I generally try and downplay the Stockton-Darlington because yes, it was very significant from a kind of a railway perspective because it was carrying reasonably regular thing, but actually it kind of fell, and it was it was Stevenson as well, but it kind of fell between standard gauge too. It kind of fell between really the most important railway for the development of railways is actually Liverpool and Manchester. In any case, it combined the kind of some of Stevenson's or Stevenson inspired locomotives that he created, kind of that he'd seen other locomotives and he borrowed heavily, and potentially Trevithick's actually. I combined that with a kind of an advanced form of the plateway, which was the kind of with rails sat vertically that we're familiar with. It was a winning combination, and the world was forever changed as a result. And to be honest, kind of whilst developments in trains got fancier, there's tremendous leaps and bounds in train technology. The infrastructure on which it sat hasn't really developed that much since the Stockton-Darlington's first standard gauge lines. And the reality of that, the simplicity and functionality of railway tracks means very little has actually changed. So if we have a look at this is the original tramway actually, or a piece of one of Trevithick's early tramways, and it there's check rails. There's you can see the crossing nose. You can see it's being held to gauge by these bars. Actually, there's a tremendous amount there that's very familiar. You can see switches at the top, switch sliders. Looks a bit like a Playmobil railway panel or a Lego one more than a modern railway one, but all the bits are there. Actually, very little's changed. So you can see, compare that to modern S&C layouts, actually not much has changed. And the reason for that is it comes down to some sciencey bits. So it comes down to I'm not going to shout power in my Clarkson voice, Michael. It's not happening. I don't have a Clarkson voice. I'm in denial about this. The railway owes its endurance to the fact that these fundamental principles. So stress equals force divided by area. So if you've got, there's a diagram that really shows this neatly. I don't know how many of you have seen this, but this image here is an image that represents the principle of load transfer, and so the railway owes its endurance to the fact that this setup, the way we design railways, offers a really high level of control over the distribution of loads. So at the top, where you've got the contact between the wheel and the rail, you've got a very small contact patch, about the size of a 5p piece or a thumbnail. The stress is very, very high It's high enough that actually it liquefies the steel. You get ratcheting of the steel at the top, but the steel is strong enough on both the wheel and the rail that load is that the interface there is fine. You can have a very small size contact patch, very high stresses, but then those stresses from having the very high stress at the wheel rail interface, those stresses get distributed. So by the time you get down to kind of basically underneath the ballast, it's at the point where you can put your hand underneath the railway and support a train going past. 50 kilopascals is easily the amount that your skin can sort of sustain. It's over a very large area. So actually the stresses are massively dissipated by this, very neatly by this sort of layout of railway. Anywho, so that is yes, thank you, David. Patreon only update for me shouting power in a Clarkson voice. Yeah, possibly. In any case, this stress equals force times area means that the combination of this principal load transfer means that you compare that to a road. With roads you've got a system that is inherently more flexible, so you don't have to do much to the infrastructure, but you have a much more flexible system, which means that you need to have a larger contact patch to carry similar levels of load. So that means that for rail, you've got a contact patch about the size of a 5p piece. For road, that contact patch, for HGVs, is the size of an A4 sheet of paper. Now, what does that mean? It's about friction. So if you have a really small contact patch, that means that your friction is very, very low, which means that your energy efficiency is huge. And that is fundamentally why railways is good in it. It really is as simple as that. You've got there are all sorts of other ancillary things, but generally you can you can replicate those with in a tire system. But if you really want efficiency, energy efficiency, and a system that is really durable and robust, that's why railways endure. That's why we still have them now in a way that other systems don't. So anyway, right, sorry, that's the lecture over. I promise, I'm really sorry. Yeah. Right, so, sciencey bit over. Let's talk about people movers. Hopefully that sciencey bit didn't last too long. What was that? That was like 6 minutes. Yeah, okay, that's fine. I don't know how well that works in audio-only mode. To all those listening in audio-only mode, I sincerely apologise. Yeah, this basically boils down to rail good, car bad. Speaking of which, people movers. So we're going to start categorising railway systems. This is the bit you've all been waiting for, categorising our railway systems. I'm going to bring OBS back so I know what the hell's going on. There's my face. It's still here. I can confirm my face is still here. Hello, everyone. Oh, actually, let's just move some pixels around. Oh, there we go. That's better, isn't it? Let's get some framing done. Lovely. Right. Yeah, there's don't worry about what's going on behind me. Anyway, so what we're on about, people movers. So if Charlie's watching this, she'll be very glad to see that the Parry people mover is a thing. It is. I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about, well, is the Parry people mover actually a tram? But it isn't, because it is on dedicated infrastructure. So it is a people mover, much like what used to be maglev but was repurposed into a more traditional kind of conventional people mover. There are quite a few of these people movers around. There's a new one being built in Luton, actually. People movers have their role. They have their role. You'll notice actually that these do not. People movers are a bit of an ambiguous one because they don't have to be conventional steel on steel. Indeed, these ones aren't. They're kind of a weird hybrid system. But they are dedicated infrastructure. So I would count some of the. There are a few systems that don't have the traditional steel on steel that kind of come in as people movers in the UK. Heathrow has its people movers. Yeah, so people movers, and I would count. Yes, the Parry people mover is basically a normal train that's just very, very small. But actually, yeah, I'm going to count the Parry people mover as being part of that category of people mover. So that's a bit of a funny category at the start. And the next category, as you might guess, it is the cutest train that anyone's ever seen. Let's just dwell on the Parry people mover for a moment, everyone. So on screen is, for anyone who doesn't know what the Parry people mover looks like, you can get the spoken word, particularly if you're blind and you're just listening to this, you can get onto Wikipedia, search for the British Rail Class 139, and it'll give you the Parry, or search Parry people mover, and you'll get a load of hits on there, and it'll read out what that is. It's kind of like a little bus with a bit too much stuff stuck on the front. It's a very strange thing, to be honest. I've never travelled on it. It gets so much love because well, look at it, it's ridiculous. When people, particularly in this country, but generally humans, like weird oddities. Is the Stourbridge line still connected to the proper network? I don't know if it is, actually. I don't know much about the Stourbridge line. It's a line that there are other people who do other YouTube-y stuff that have probably done all sorts on the Stourbridge line, so I'd heartily recommend going and having... yeah, David Frankel reckons that the question of the PPM, the Parry People Mover, being whatever it is, depends on whether we're looking at it technically or functionally. It's adorable, it defies categorisation, I love it. Yes, there's a lot of love going on for the Parry People Mover. Anyway, right, so the next category is trams. And actually, trams, there are still quite a few about. For example, Serbia, a city that I spend quite a lot of time in these days, does have quite a few trams still running. Blackpool still has some trams running officially. And yes, there are lots of historic tram systems, or there are a few historic tram systems running in the UK still, but we don't actually have many tram systems running in the UK. One, Blackpool. And actually Blackpool is slowly being kind of converted into being a light rail system. Or, sorry, well, it is actually light rail. We'll talk about why I'm hesitating on that in a second, because categorisation is always a bit of a tricky thing. So trams, kind of old-fashioned. They're basically buses that are running on... trams are essentially, the way to look at them, if it's a tram, it's a bus that has got a pantograph and is running on steel wheels on steel rails. It might not even have a pantograph, or it should have a bloody pantograph, but it might not. Key thing being, it is a railway, but it's a bus on a railway, and it's a railway that has lots of cars running around on it. Anyway, then we move on to light rail. Now, people are going to get angry at me because I've put the Tyne and Wear Metro on here. That's because the Tyne and Wear Metro is borderline into other categories, but I would postulate, being a big fan of the Tyne and Wear Metro, I'll point out that the Tyne and Wear Metro is a light rail system, not a metro system or a rapid transit system. And I'll maybe get into why in a bit, but do some Googling and decide. In any case, light rail is the next category. So we've had people movers, trams, light rail. What's the next category? Anyone guessing? Feel free to second guess. Well, the next we have are medium capacity systems, which is the formal name for what often gets called LRT, light rapid transit. But actually, I'm gonna try and stop using light rapid transit. I've used it a lot before, and in my reading to get some definitions down, I decided light rapid transit is actually really light rapid transit is a descriptor for both of these systems in the UK, light rail and medium capacity systems. Yeah, so the DLR is one of these. The DLR is a light rapid transit system. It's not a light railway, and there is a difference between those two. It's an important difference. Light rail is the system is light. It's not necessarily intensively used, and it's defined by being. It's not necessarily a dedicated infrastructure. To be honest, go onto Wikipedia to find the precise differences, and in fact, the UITP definitions, I think, split these as well. But the reality is that light rail is a fairly rudimentary type of system, whereas light rapid transit introduces all the additional sort of stuff. So you're talking about its intensity. The key thing for all these is not actually the technology, and as I'll talk about momentarily. 1934, we're not doing too badly. Next, we get on to rapid transit. Now, the threshold here between light rapid transit, or really medium capacity systems, and rapid transit is that we are now getting into the realms of what can be called sensibly a metro. And here is probably my favourite metro system in the UK, only because it's an underdog. Sorry, London Underground, and everyone who's going to now just hate me and block me and tell me I'm rubbish. But I love it because it's an underdog, and because what a system. It's stupid for so many reasons. It's too small. It should, I mean, in terms of gauge, but also in terms of loading gauge, in terms of track gauge, and in terms of the fact that it's still one loop and should have been expanded years ago and hasn't been. But I love it, I adore it, and also it's orange, so yeah, it's also a winner. But there it is, the Glasgow subway, rapid transit. But within rapid transit, of course, is London Underground as well. Now, then we're going on to a sort of a weird hybrid. Now, the thing about rapid transit is the key thing is, from a technology point of view, this isn't the key thing in terms of its definition, but from a technology point of view, it is the fact that it's grade separated. It's entirely its own dedicated system. It doesn't have mixed traffic. It's not coming on and off with other systems. Metro rail maybe provides the same level of sort of service provision, if you like. Sorry, it maybe does create the same for service provision, but it will it might well have a dedicated tracks in its core, the urban core. But if it starts to mix with other traffic on the kind of as it kind of comes out of the city, then that means it isn't a rapid transit system. It becomes metro rail. Which is sort of a bit of a hybrid definition between, then we get up to commuter rail. And the thing that defines these are not so formal definitions, actually. These are definitions that's particularly metro rail is sort of a definition that it does exist, but it's not so formal. It's pretty ambiguous. It's pretty changeable between different kind of regions. Then we go on from metro rail. So Thameslink is a metro rail system. Crossrail will be. Those are the only two in the UK. London Overground is an interesting one because the capacity is not huge. The largest capacity part of Overground, someone can kind of go in there for me, but it's not a huge long train, is it? None of the Overground trains are massive. What's the longest Overground train? Is it 9 car? In any case, London Overground sits in a funny space for here. I would say London Overground is commuter rail, actually. Just like the Cross City line, just like a few lines in Manchester, and indeed, Glasgow has a very good commuter rail network. So this is often called suburban rail as well, but these are not metro rail systems. They don't have huge capacities, which kind of leads on to the next point, actually, which is basically. What is the thing? Right. Okay. So there's all the. So I've shown you all that. Let's put up the picture of metro rail first because it looks nice. The old trainbow up there, which may or may not. If Charlie's on, Charlie, apologies. But in fact, let's sit on commuter rail because it makes me angry looking at the. Also, there's some nice P-way in here, some slips. Anyway, right. What's the chat? Would I call Thameslink a metro rail system for its full length? Well, it's a bit of a hybrid, isn't it? It becomes commuter rail as it gets further out, but certainly through the core of the city, it's metro rail. What is Mersey? Yes, Mersey rail. Yeah, very good point. Mersey rail is probably sitting in. The trouble is, it's not. Again, Mersey rail isn't huge capacity, so it's sitting. I would say that Mersey rail is sitting as being commuter rail, despite the fact that it's tunnelled for sections of it. I'd say that it's still only commuter rail. Does anyone disagree with me and think I'm wrong? Dave Frankel is saying I'm splitting hairs a bit. Isn't Mersey rail metro rail? Yeah, no. A few people are asking about Mersey rail. I love Mersey rail. It's another good system. It is awesome rail. But I think it's commuter rail, and the reason I'm saying that is. Well, okay, what do people think is the main thing that really defines the difference between all of these? And I'm not going to put numbers up. Spoilers. It's, people are asking, wait, Metro West. Thoughts on Metro West? Bristol does not have any sort of, it's got some sort of commuter rail, but it's such a, I don't know, what is it, like 2 lines maybe? It's very weak. Bristol does not have a proper. Yeah, the longest Mersey rail consists of 6 cars. It is mostly segregated, but again, Mersey rail mixes with other traffic, which means it can't be, it's at best metro rail, but I think by the capacity, it's only commuter rail. And that's a spoiler for what the thing that defines what all these are. It's not actually the technicalities. Remember, we've got to move away from the technical stuff. And there's lots of technical people here, but we've got to move away from the technology. It's, what is it? I just mashed my keyboard, didn't move. It is passengers. Not those. Not. I mean, that's a cheap gag. It's about capacity. I'm banging the drum. Capacity. It's about what it does, not about what it looks like. So we've got to look at this. Yes, there are things like grade separation and dedicated rights of way, mixing with traffic, but these really are all things that impact on capacity. So it's all about capacity. So I'm going to leave capacity up there to etch into your brains while I track back through the chat and see what people are saying. John Mannion, commuter rail always been defined as centrally terminating. That's interesting. That's it's a technical factor rather than a capacity thing, but that's an interesting one. Essentially, if you've got centrally terminating, it's considered as commuter rail. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Ailey, you did miss Glasgow subway chat. Sorry, mate. Let's see. So we need a comparison table. Well, the thing is, I could have put a comparison table in here, but I want people to create I want people to chuck me, angrily throw me what they think their respective systems are and how they fit into these categories. I'll even put in what I'll do is I'll post on Twitter for all those. Apologies for those of you who aren't Twittery people on here. For those on Twitter, I'll post an image of a blank table where you can shove in the logos of the things that you think fit in the respective boxes, and then you can shout at me about why. Let's go through, see what else. Remember to add my name into the comments, by the way, if you're asking a question, just so I can see. Metro versus commuter rail, bidirectional, frequent off-peak service. Yeah, these are all service provisions, but overall for me, it's about capacity. It's all about capacity. So let's see. Explains HS. Eurostar Lover 009. What explains HS2? Because that's long distance, kind of heavy rail. It's sort of slightly separate. William's making a reference to something after this. The chat's gone off. Look at our fantastic map of 37 lines which run once per day. Yeah, this is true. This is very true. Jeff Wade is asking if there's a practical benefit to having so many categories in transport planning terms. Well, it allows us to focus. Basically, it allows you. So this is something that I'm like. I can't remember whether I've had this before, or whether it's come straight from Edward Lee of Smarter Cambridge Transport, Smarter Transport Cambridge, whichever way around the name of the organisation is. Shout out Ed, who reminded me that it's all about nodes before modes, and the reality is you need to look at what your urban area needs, and then you fit the system onto that. So by looking at these different categories of transit system, by having these categories, it makes it easier for a transit authority to decide which one is relevant to the particular flow they're looking at putting into public transport or upgrading. So, or indeed looking at the future flow as well. So the reason we have these breakdowns, right? Bye, Sarah. Enjoy your dinner. Hopefully, the recommendation was a good one if it came up in the chat. Restaurants. I haven't been to one. I think hopefully we're going to one on Sunday night. I haven't been to a restaurant in the UK yet. Went to one in Serbia. It was a bit of a weird experience having food handed to you. Anyway, this is irrelevant to everyone who's here and wanting to talk about trains. Anyway, so there's lots of So the reason for having these splitting. The various splitting of these categories is that it allows us to know which system should be happening for a given flow. So it means that we can hit people over the head when they haven't. If we just had three categories of high intensity service, medium intensity service, and low intensity service, it might make it harder for us to bash the heads of the politicians who are avoiding investing in the right infrastructure. Whereas having a decent number of categories, because these things all do. These all operate quite differently. They're all quite different looking systems. And it's the fact they look different is what gives the different capacities. Anyway, I'm wittering on and we've got a while to go. No, frequency alone isn't enough. Right, let's talk about capacity. So let's go in here, and so here is I don't know if you've seen these before. These are the new editions of my permanent rail engineering capacity comparisons. This is for Thameslink. This is the potential for Thameslink. I should have put the Crossrail one on. Thameslink isn't quite operating to this level yet, but it will. The way that you get capacity, so capacity is measured in passengers per hour per direction, pph PD, and so that's how many. So that's looking at how many trains, how many people can fit in each train, and that gives you a pph PD value. And in this case, if you've got a Thameslink train that's carrying around 1,700 people, you've got 24 hours departures an hour. You have a capacity of around 42,000. It's as simple as that. Big numbers. Yes, David. So I'm going to keep going. I'm going to address David's. David's made a very good point, and I'm going to come back to that after we've gone through these. So that's Thameslink, which is Metro Rail. So that's kind of basically the best. That's the highest capacity railway system in the UK. It's very impressive, but it's not. You don't have to have heavy. You don't have to have what we call heavy rail. So really, we mean the National Rail Network. We don't have to have heavy rail to get those numbers. Actually, the Victoria Line. This is very bright blue. This is the official Victoria Line blue in RGB, but I should have toned it down a bit because crikey, that's bright. So everyone who's colourblind can't see that, but basically this is the Victoria Line, and it's a rapid transit system. And they're 8-car trains, 1,128 people per train, 36 departures per hour, give you over 40,000 passengers per hour per direction. Big numbers. These are huge numbers. Whereas if you go to Manchester Metrolink, which is, as you see, this is an older one, and I've written light rapid transit. I shall be correcting this now to fit the new categories. This system actually has a capacity of around about a tenth of a full-scale metro system. So whether it's rapid transit or whether it's metro rail, commuter rail system, actually, metro rail and commuter rail are a bit hybridized, by the way. So the reality is that I mean, sort of. Metro rail is just really saying it's not dedicated rapid transit. It's a more conventional railway, but it's reaching capacities of metro rail. It's all about capacity. So people are going to shout at me about one tunnel. So one tunnel in each direction. These are the reason for these capacity comparisons is to allow you to compare different transport systems. That's the point of it. Incidentally, if you're curious as to what the Boring Company's Loop achieves, there we are, Boring Company's Loop, as confirmed in one of their own press releases pretty recently, they're looking at managing to squeeze 100 departures per hour, which is already reasonably rapid. So that's quite a lot of vehicles somehow departing, but that still only means about 100 passengers per hour per direction. So what a load of junk. Absolute junk. Anyway, so there we are, capacity comparisons. Metrolink is just, so let's see. So we've got, could Merseyrail, lots of Merseyrail chat. Right, so Dave Frankel made a very good point, which is the counter-argument to this is, could an obsession with putting systems into boxes not be holding back innovation? Germany, for example, has made a success of mixing otherwise separate modes. A couple of things to that. In a country that has a better track record, not a perfect track record on rail investment, actually, they're much better at urban transport investment, but on a country like the UK, which is uniquely hopeless at making urban transport investment, actually it is important, because these, as I've just said, these systems are all defined by capacity, and if we're saying that we've got a metro system in Birmingham and Manchester, and it isn't a metro system because it's carrying a tiny fraction of the number of people, then you aren't creating the opportunities in that city that public transport should and can to get people not only driving economic growth and all those things, but actually more importantly, just getting people to choose to take public transport rather than driving. So that's my response, David, is that I'm not saying that we have to box this. This isn't about categorisation for categorisation's sake. That's really a fun discussion to be had in on Twitter. The important thing, the tools of laying out these categories, is more to give us blunt objects to politely, or should we say rotten tomatoes to throw at politicians that fight against proper urban rail transit. Let's look at a map let's look at our little island of GB again. Here it is. There's the island of GB. Funny little shape it is. Here are all of our cities again. They're just like last week. Here are all of our cities that have populations of over 250,000. And actually, let's break these down to three kind of groups. So we've got between 250 and 500,000 people in the built-up area. We've got, crikey, time has flown already. We've got between 500 1,000 and 1 million people in the built-up area. And then the last sort of collection we've got, which is 6 cities, so 6 built-up areas in the UK that are larger than 1 million people. So these are big cities. These are massive cities by any measure. Now, how many of these do we think have rapid transit systems? By which I mean, or metro rail. Which ones? Any thoughts, people? There we go. So some thoughts. While you're thinking of thoughts about how many, so that we need a number of the number of cities with rapid transit systems. This conversation has really, there's discussions about BTEX going on, which is yeah, here we go. Let's. I see. Okay, let's not be mean about. Yeah, agreed. Yes. Right. There's all sorts of discussions. I'm sure it was harmless fun. Right. Anyway, so 4, 6. So David Frankel is agreeing with 4. Engineering Focus is putting 2. Michael Dono's 2. And yes, so we've got 2 of proper rapid transit. So David Frankel is suggesting London, Liverpool, Newcastle, and Glasgow. I'm afraid the answer is very much 2. There are only 2 cities in the UK that have rapid transit systems. The Tyne and Wear Metro is not a rapid transit system, at least not yet. If it increases its frequency across the system, then it has the potential to be. But the vehicle, the trains are short. So the capacity of the Tyne and Wear, I need to do a capacity comparison for the Tyne and Wear Metro actually, but it's not huge. It is not a high capacity system, and it should be. It really should be. So there are deaths of 3, 2 or 3, 5. Bjorn, you've been very optimistic. This country is to quote Alice, Caldwell Kelly, cannot overstate the extent to which the UK is a failed state, and that we have 6 million plus built up urban areas and only 2 of them have rapid transit is shockingly embarrassing. Dave Frankel is pointing out that the Tyne and Wear Metro has a higher capacity than the Glasgow Metro. Does it? Does it? I'm going to do capacity comparison with both of them, and you might well be right. So there we go. 600 per metro on new fleet times 6 per hour. Yeah, it's not great, is it? It is not great. So that's 3,600 per hour. That's on the Tyne and Wear Metro. I think that's smaller than. Oh, go on. Let's do the sums now. So right, we can crowdsource. So that was 3,600. So wait a minute, let me get my pen up. Let's just go for white. So the Tyne and Wear Metro. So what was that? So we had, what was it? 3,600 passengers per hour per. Don't worry, mouse drawing, I really need a whack-em. Right, this is, so we've got 3,600 pph PD for the Tyne and Wear Metro. Glasgow Subway, what frequency? What's the capacity of the new trains? Let's go in here and have a look. So Glasgow Subway, rolling stock. 2nd generation, nope. The 3rd generation is, how many people, capacity? 112 plus 165. That's 165, which is 277. So how frequent does the so that's 277. So Glasgow Subway. So that's 277 plus what have we got? Go on, folks. Tell me how frequently. Oh no, we're talking about core capacity here. Why draw the mouse when you have a keyboard? Because the part of the fun is putting it on screen and it looks a bit rubbish. That's kind of part of the gag. So we're looking at. I'll tell you what. Well, let's sack this in. So Glasgow. So if we've got, what was that? That was 277 of Glasgow Subway. This is quite. This is some good stuff. The trains every 4 minutes at peak. So 60 divided by 4, so that gives us 15 trains an hour. So 15 times 277 is equal to 4155. 4155 p per hour per direction. So Glasgow subway just edges it, but it is very low. Like, I will freely admit, it is very low. However, it's fully dedicated, and besides, as we've said, categories are there to be broken. Numbers of doors for metro systems. Oh, I don't know. You can, yeah. Leeds is the only urban area with over 1 million people in the UK without a mass transit system. Yeah, but it's even worse than that. You know, we've got. So if we go back to, let's flick. So in terms of the systems that we have, this is where I think it has broken down to, and this is probably the thing that I'll use to create the table. We have nearly have 6 people movers. We have. See, I've got 0 here because actually Blackpool trams is really moving into the kind of light rail, or actually into the medium capacity system type thing. And these both really come under generally come under this category of light rapid transit. But I'm going to stop using that because it's a bit of a euphemism for the fact that actually there's quite a big difference between these two types of system. So this is designed between Edinburgh Tram and between Edinburgh Tram and this kind of medium capacity rail. Yeah. So really it doesn't matter. So actually we've got 7 of these systems in total, and how you split them is sort of dependent on, we could go through and work out capacities for each one of them, and maybe that's exactly what I'm going to do, and I'll issue them out on Twitter and we can have a think about them, and kind of compare these different systems. But the key thing is that in terms of rapid transit, we only have 2 of the systems here, and arguably, yeah, if we decided Glasgow subway gets kicked out of that reduces to 1. So we only have 1, and which city is that in? Can anyone remind me which city it's in? That's right, London. Yep, that's right. Which would make sense because it's the biggest city, but that doesn't explain why it's omitted from 5 other million plus people built up areas. So this is Thameslink here, and also Crossrail eventually when it does actually get built. And in terms of commuter rail, well, commuter rail actually in terms of capacity, commuter rail sort of often is far below these. Actually, commuter rail often comes in here, but it depends because, for example, in you've got mixed traffic systems, but you have definitely, for example, in Mumbai, it's very much commuter rail because it's not dedicated. It's very much not on dedicated lines, but it's mixing up. And actually, you do have some on dedicated lines. Again, these become a bit of a hybrid. But we're talking about conventional rail systems. So for me, it's about capacity. But actually, you could maybe argue that these can be merged. But in terms of what constitutes a metro, these are the things that I'm talking about. So I don't count commuter rail as metro. I'm just talking about rapid transit and metro rail. So there you go. So Jeff Wade, I'm not going to answer your question publicly about Metroflow because I was the lead track designer on that project. So yeah, but if you check into your Patreon messages, there is an answer. So that's me sacked now. But anyway, yeah, there's a sensible answer to your question, which was about Metroflow. Right, so the House of Lords moves to York. Can we look forward to the York Underground? Absolutely, yeah. The sooner we get an underground system connecting from this end of the west end of York over to the east end of York over to the station, the happier I'll be. Oh, anywho, yeah, it's a very good point that most of London Underground is Victorian. The reality is that we just don't build public transport infrastructure in this country. We're really bad at it. So that's scribbles. Here are some scribbles, some good old scribbles, lovely, which people can't really read, but that's kind of part of the fun. Where does that leave us with these two? I don't begrudge these systems. They're terrific. They're both really good systems. Oh, actually, while I'm at it, So this spreadsheet, which I put up last week for a while, is one that I need to update with these new categories. In fact, so I've currently got like a slightly different. I've called it Urban Rail. So I've got slightly different categories. I'm going to recategorize these according to the new categories I've sort of come up with, and maybe I'll decide to make up new categories just to fool you all. But the key thing is the kind of the key takeaway in all this. This spreadsheet is, eventually I'll share it, but it kind of goes through and explains where we've got. So is that Blackpool down there? Yeah. So it's looking at where we've got these 6 cities. So the 6 big cities we've got. So it's Liverpool, Birkenhead, built-up area, Greater Glasgow, West Yorkshire, West Midlands, Greater Manchester, Greater London. Of all of those, only one having, if we discount poor old Glasgow's subway, only London has a rapid transit system. And in terms, so that's just rubbish. It's just rubbish. And yes, West Yorkshire has a bit of a low-density urban rail system, but it's a regional or rural railway network within a city. It's not high density to any kind of capacity. It's not high frequency, and the trains are not long. Until Thameslink length trains are running through the Castlefield corridor, which is a tricky one for all sorts of signalling reasons. But until you've got trains running that length through the centre of Manchester or through the centre of Birmingham or through the centre of Leeds, we are really not doing the right thing in terms of investing in urban transport. So, lots of chat. Coventry's very light rail. Yeah, I know. That's a whole new category that we can worry about. So anyway, so this spreadsheet here is something that I'll update, and I will eventually we'll share. It contains all the major built-up urban areas larger than 100,000. Now, bearing in mind that in Europe, anything over a million generally justifies a proper rapid transit system. Anything between kind of 500,000 and anything between 500,000 and a million, you'll find either a kind of a light, what I've been referring to previously as light rapid transit, but one of these medium capacity systems, and then anything less, between 250 and any city, basically any city larger than 100,000, justifies a tram network. But this rail natter is not about trams, because the #BuildTrams rail natter is for another day. So we're just talking about metros, and we're talking about the fact that we should be having rapid transit systems in 6, so that's London Underground style systems in 6 of the cities in the UK, the 6 major built-up areas. And we should be looking at having these we should be having systems like the West Midlands Metro or Metrolink these should be the systems that we have in those other cities. So, there are lots of these, so if we flick back this map, so all these places in green, so that's Plymouth, Swansea, Brighton, Sunderland, Hull. These are the places that we should be looking to develop tram systems for, kind of medium capacity sort of systems, LRT in kind of old parlance. The pink places probably can justify a decent medium capacity system, and the blues should all have rapid transit systems. And really, there's no reason why we can't have rapid transit systems to a lesser extent in the pink cities, if we were going to kind of aim to the future. In any case, the point being, if it is a metro, great. If you've got a city that has 1 million people in it or more, a built-up area, 1 million people or more, and it's got a rapid transit system. So when I say metro, what I mean by metro, to conclude all this, what I mean is rapid transit or metro rail. So a system with a capacity in excess of 10 to 20,000 passengers per hour per direction. So that's what you're kind of looking at. If you've got 10 to 20,000 passengers per hour per direction, I think you're happy to say it's a metro system. So to contradict everything I've said, independent of what your system is, if you're pulling 10 to 20, the only way you can pull that number of people really is with the systems that I've called metro, so rapid transit or metro rail. If you can get a tram to have a passenger capacity of 20,000 passengers per hour per direction, best of luck. That would be remarkable, but you'd end up building something that looks like a London Underground on land. In any case, the key thing is that everyone needs to share and shout about #NotAMetro when it isn't a metro. And I will continue to rant about this until the cows come home, because cities like Leeds are frighteningly long overdue any form of mass transit, let alone anything, a proper metro system of some kind. Right, so much chat. A few of those pink cities look close to each other. Wouldn't something that links the two make sense? Yeah, definitely. Some of those urban areas that urban area I've gone with the ONS categorisation of built-up areas, which do split some out. So if we whiz back to that one. Yeah, so some of them look very close together. For example, Derby Nottingham, they're very close together. Reading and what's that other built-up area? It's the... let's have a look at this. It's the Farnborough Aldershot built-up area. Yeah, Reading, Farnborough, Aldershot are quite close together. Those places in the Thames, I think, do they count as Thames Valley? Yeah, there are a few that Sunderland, and the northeast as well. So Tyne and Wear is a dedicated system, but Sunderland and Tyneside count as two separate built-up areas according to the ONS. So that's kind of why I've split those up that way. But yeah, the reality is that's one bigger lump, and actually you can grow that. The number of people there, you grow even more. Should we be solving our housing crisis by building new railways and housing together? Asks David Shepherd. Absolutely, we should. Yes. Very definitely. The trouble with that was that the Metropolitan line enabled a load of people to have their houses, and then they all became NIMBYs and didn't want any more people arriving. So they wanted to maintain their green belt, because they wanted still to feel like the countryside. So the Metropolitan line kind of made its own bed and had to line it on that one. Tim Dunn and I probably could shout and argue about that. Well, not argue. I don't know. I'd be interested to chat to Tim about that and what he thinks, because basically the Metropolitan line created and then destroyed any chances. It created Metroland and then also simultaneously destroyed there being any chances of being a second or third generation of Metroland, because people decided the green belt was a good idea. Yeah, Jeff, I agree. The Tyne and Wear Metro is a bit higher, I think. The South Gosforth Peelaw stretch does have about 16 trains an hour, I think, at peak time. So that is reaching about 10,000. So it's getting there. So in terms of what we need basically is for me to put numbers up for a categorisation, isn't it? Well, this is a natter, not a lecture. Apart from the little bit where I did do a lecture. Build houses and railways, then obliterate the houses to build more houses and railways. Roaming autocrat. That's one way to do it. Eurostar Lover 009 asks: should the government invest more in the north on railways instead of London, apart from upgrades? No, there's no sensible economic reason other than the ability of people, the availability of people and resources to not be doing both. But on that point, there is a shortage of skilled people, and so I do think that it's wrong. It would be wrong for Crossrail 2 to be pressing ahead if other projects didn't also get the go-ahead. But from an economic perspective, remember, there is, from a national finances perspective, there is zero literate reason not to be investing in all of these things at once. That money is not an object. The availability of people to deliver the work is an object. Time is the biggest sort of resource that we're squandering at this point. Let's have a look. There are 30 trams per hour on the Manchester Central bits around Cornbrook, but the trains, yeah. So those capacity comparisons need a bit of work actually, and it's quite difficult to find peak throughput on some of these systems. But I think I'm going to revisit these. Yeah, there's a whole episode on engineering focus. There is a whole episode on working out why we should and should not be naming bits of high-speed rail certain stupid things. Northern Powerhouse Rail is a stupid name. High-speed North is a stupid name. Should we call High Speed 3? Because we've got High Speed 1. High Speed 2 makes sense as a name. High Speed 3 makes sense as a name. And also, we shouldn't be calling them stupid things like High Speed 2 is the right name for that project. We shouldn't be creating huge, long names to try and... It's not the name that is the reason the general public don't necessarily get what HS2 is. Anyway, that's another story entirely. Oh, so where am I being atted? Lovely, yep. Earned a ton of cash from house building. That's David Shepherd. Michael Dono, thoughts on trolley buses? They're buses, but better, because they're electric, so they don't have to carry around their own power. So they can have a higher capacity, and they're lighter, and they're easier to maintain, and cheaper. Actually, once you build the infrastructure, the whole life cost of a trolley bus system is generally cheaper than a normal bus system where you've got intensive usage. No, trolley buses, big fan of those. Big fan of those. And again, you might well say, well, can you have hybrids where they do both? Well, the whole point of a trolley bus system is that you've got buses that don't have an engine in them, so they're cheaper and lighter. Yeah. How long? David Thomason asks, how long would it take to skill up to build a metro in this day and age? The last one was the Victoria Line in the 60s. Well, we just built Crossrail, which is broadly how, like, building a conventional rapid transit system nowadays is more complicated. Actually, you find yourself ending up with something like Crossrail quite easy. To get the capacities nowadays, actually, you'll find yourself building a system like Crossrail, a Metro rail system, more often than you would potentially be building a rapid transit system. That's why you end up with these hybridized sort of things. So you'd end up building. So, for example, in Manchester and Birmingham, actually, what we should be doing is not building. The priority should actually be a Metro rail tunnel underneath. So we need to do PicVic, look up PicVic on the interwebs in Manchester, and then in Birmingham, the Cross City line needs to be buried underneath Birmingham. There needs to be a tunnel that goes underneath, just like Crossrail. So you don't have any interaction with the kind of the mixing of traffic through New Street. Really, you should have an underground station at New Street that's underneath New Street, but there are lots of building piles that get in the way. It's doable though. Let's see. Yes, let's see. The reality is there's always going to be a hybrid mixture, but the point of this chat isn't that we shouldn't have hybrids, and I fully agree with David's point. The point of this chat is to shout at people when they're calling things that are definitely not a metro. Let's see, what else have we got? Underground rail to Isle of Wight to reduce commuting time. I think there are other fish to fry first. Tram power scheme that's been coming soon in Preston for what feels like forever. There are lots and lots of systems that really ought to be well along in development. The South Hampshire conurbation should have had a tram system. It should have retained its tram system really, but it should have had a tram system. A light rail or a medium capacity system should have been installed there. Oh crikey! It's 2012. Time has flown by. I don't believe there is a 125 mile an hour limit on HS3. I think that is. I don't know if it's been published anywhere, but I believe that there's no particular description on that. The trains will have to be 360 km/h compatible because they will run on HS2, and if they don't, they screw up HS2. So that immediately makes you think, well, if we're having to procure trains for HS3 that are classic, that fit with, that are 360 km/h capable, then we might as well look at building a 360 km/h system. I've actually seen the alignment, the probable alignment that HS3 will take, and it's a high-speed system. It's a proper high-speed system. It's high-speed 2 standards. So take from that what you will. Yes, I'm late, which means it's time to move on. Thanks for all your questions, everyone. Giel, if you're with us, thanks as ever for putting us on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and t'other one, the one with the squares that doesn't have a name that I can't remember. And if you've joined us on this podcast, thank you very much indeed. This is a very weird format for you, so thanks for sticking with it. Hopefully it's vaguely engaging. The dulcet tones of my weird hybrid Scottish, Devon, Wales, North accent all smooshing together doesn't put you to sleep, or maybe it does, and that's kind of the point. In any case, thanks. Next point. Yes. Gary Keener is joining us next week to talk about making electrification stick. So we're going to cover all sorts of different subjects. But this is a really interesting one that I'm sure lots of you will be interested to watch live and to ask questions, but get your questions lined up. It'll be a very Q&A session, I'm sure. There are a few potential no-go areas because Gary's involved in things that he can't necessarily share and talk about. He also can't be as outspoken as I am. So what we're going to do is pretend that his mic is cut out and that he's not hearing things, and then I can get very angry about the mess that's being made of electrification in South Wales, for example. All the discontinuous electrification stuff is just dismal. All the downhill, not wired, uphill, wired stuff is just a disaster. Absolutely dreadful. Awful engineering, awful operational planning. It's just awful. It's just a way. It's just bumping the cost. If it was reducing the rate of build and making it a simpler system to run, great. But it isn't. It's making it a horrendously complicated system that's going to require very expensive and heavy vehicles that undermines the whole point of electrification in the first place. Anyway, the reason I've said that now and not next week is so that I don't have to say that when Gary's on the line, because Gary's very much better behaved than I am when it comes to his big employer. In any case, join! Hooray! Electrification. Thanks to all the new Patreon people. You're brilliant. You help me do this stuff. And you also, for all of you who are watching, vote on the rail natter themes. There's a poll that's still running Vote there to bump up your favourite theme for the next one. I think sleeper trains are looking really popular. And if you have any suggestions for people, the open suggestion for people to join RailNatter is still very much there. For anyone watching, if you've got an interesting subject, if you email me at railnatter@garethdennis.co.uk with a suggestion, with maybe some pictures that you want to put up, theme suggestions, send that through to railnatter@garethdennis.co.uk. And I will have a look through and see what the suggestions are. And maybe one of you is going to join me for a RailNatter coming soon. Yeah, that's that. Let's get my big face up before I make the small face, make this end. Thanks everyone for joining. Yeah, exactly. It's just dreadful. Right, people are getting upset with me about South Wales electrification. It's just a shambles. Oh, people want to know about the a tunnel to Northern Ireland. Whew. Well, or a tunnel to the island of Ireland, actually. In any case, right, lots of chat. We're going to talk about fizzy knitting next week. Yeah, we're going to talk about the fizzy knitting project. If any of you know what that means, ooh, there are a few things we'll talk about. In any case, you've been a pleasure. It's 2016. I'm very late. It was going to be a shorter one. I was hoping it was going to be like snappy tonight, but it wasn't at all. You're all brilliant. I love these. These give me life. Lockdown is dismal, and RailNatter is something that I very much look forward to. So thanks all. I might have had a haircut by the time you next see me. In any case, all that remains for me to do is bid you adieu. Cheerio, everyone. See you at the after party. Bye. Cheerio.